welcome to Space by Stansons. Today I'm really excited to be talking to Enrique Soler, Head
Thank
of
you very much.
Design at Willmott Dixon Interiors.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me.
No, you're very, very welcome. I'm excited, Enrique, because you've got a really strong architectural background, which I haven't actually spoken to many people from. It's mostly like interiors.
Okay.
So it adds a bit of a fresh concept. And you've about 20 years in the UK?
Yeah. 20 years, yeah.
Coming up and to at Willmott Dixon Interiors, and obviously prior to that studying architecture, etc. So, and you've travelled quite a bit, which I always think adds a really interesting dynamic to anyone and everybody. Can you tell us a bit, just kicking off, how you got to this point in the UK?
Wow, that I can make this very long, but I will try to edit myself, although I'm not particularly good at it. But yeah, how did I end up here? It's like you know these films that start like with a massive explosion or something like that, and you suddenly hear a scratch, like you're wondering how I got here. So that's probably what I will do. So yeah, I studied architecture in Spain, but in my last year, I was fortunate enough to win a scholarship to go to Japan. So I did my final degree in Japan in a city called Tsu, which is not a big city by any standards, which in a way it helped me a lot because I wanted to do not the touristy thing, but to learn about the culture. That's why I went to Japan. I was really, really interested in Japanese architecture in particular, but in culture in general. And then I realized once I was there that I really gained a lot from the experience of traveling and experiencing a completely different culture. At that point, I was the only person from Spain there. So for a year, my interactions, even with other foreigners, they went from Spain, and the majority of people I interacted with were obviously Japanese. So I realized that I was really thriving on that. I really enjoyed constantly learning about different points of view, different cultures. So when I finished that, I was finishing my university, and it was time to start working. I was like, well, I need to go somewhere else. I just wasn't ready to go to where I came from, to Spain. So then I went to the Netherlands. I went to Rotterdam. I got a job in Rotterdam, and for 6 months I was working there. And actually I was working on international projects, and again, Rotterdam is a very vibrant city for architecture. And in the studio that I was working, there was a lot of people from different countries as well. So there was a lady from Germany, there was a guy from Poland. So it was really exciting for me. I kept learning. And at that time, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, she's British, and from Rotterdam it was relatively easy to travel here. So I started coming to London very often, and I just fell in love with it because I could see a place where the UK was already quite interesting to me, but particularly London is sort of like a melting pot of cultures, and there's a lot of people from everywhere. So I could see that was ticking a lot of boxes for me in terms of a place where I could spend some time, and that was 20 years ago. So yeah, since then I've been here.
And you've been at Willmott Dixon Interiors all that time?
No, just the last 10 years, which is obviously already quite a bit. I started working for the first few months. I did residential architecture, so I was working as an architect. And then I got a job doing retail design, and it was retail interiors design. Life took me there. And I found it really, really interesting with my background as an architect to apply that, more of like looking at from the technical side of things to get interior design solutions. So I kept learning, which was very motivational for me. But I could also see that I could add things to the equation because of the technical knowledge that architecture brings. So I did that for a few years, and I was really, really satisfied with that. But then I went back to architecture for another couple of years. I worked for a company called Chapman Taylor, who are international architects. And I really liked that. And then at some point in 2009, in the middle of the recession, everything was really doom and gloom, and people were being made redundant and all of that. And I was in a very fortunate position. I was still relatively young, and with my wife, we decided to quit our jobs and travel around the world for 7 months. 'Cause it was like, this is a unique opportunity. There's not a lot going on. Let's do that and feel that need that of traveling that we had. So we did that, and that was really enriching. And then when I came back, a few friends from previous practice had started a new design practice focusing on retail and commercial interior design. And I started working with them, and I eventually became a director in that company. And then we had a lot of business going on with Willmott Dixon, which at the time was a traditional contractor. They didn't have their in-house design element. And then we started talking, and we just came up with the idea of having an in-house architectural and interior design service for Willmott Dixon. And that was 10 years ago. And since then, we've been growing the team and having more interesting and bigger projects.
Yeah, what a amazing journey. But
Thank you.
what do you learn from your travels, like, as a whole?
I guess, the to expect the unexpected would be the type of thing, like not taking things for granted, and always remember to be humble. And that's the first thing I realized first when I was, even when I went to university. So even in Spain, I am from, mid-sized city called Murcia, and then I went to my university in Valencia, which is much bigger, and I was already like noticing a difference, and I felt certain about a number of things when I was in school, and then I went to university and like, I don't know anything about anything, and then I went to Japan, and it was again a reminder, like there's so many things that you can still learn. And I just realized that I enjoyed that, and traveling is a great way to do that. And if you work in something creative as a designer, that, at least for me, it's a very exciting thing to have, because you will always you can keep humble, you can keep learning and bringing exciting things that will motivate you. And motivation, I think, is crucial for a creative, any creative job.
It's amazing. That's a really great learning to pick out from travel. And I must admit, yeah, I agree. I love travel, experiencing different cultures and ways of life and foods. It's so enriching, to use your word. That's excellent.
Absolutely.
So applying that to workspace design and what we're talking about on the whole, kind of having a purpose for a project and a reason why, and why we might be doing a refit. Is that an area that is a bit overlooked?
Well, it used to be. It used to be overlooked. I could argue that, especially after COVID, there's a lot more thought about this, I would say, because during COVID, I think it's also important to remember this. Like, not every job, not every profession went through the same thing, and sometimes we just put in the concept of office and workplace, we put a lot of things that are not necessarily the same, but just for the sake of the conversation, during COVID, a lot of people who used to be office based and used to spend 9 to 5 days a week in an office, looking at a computer, sending emails. That's whatever job you do, there's a bit of that. But during COVID, and with the lockdowns, there was a change, and there was a lot of people starting doing that from home, and that was successful to a degree, and we can all agree that it was necessary, like the interaction and the human interaction. We're social beings after all. But after that, when we were coming back, all the office design and all the briefs that we get from clients, and all the new things that you have seen in the last few years, you can, at least my impression is that you can read a lot more thought into it. Like, that you can see a lot more purpose, because I think now companies are saying, okay, how can we bring people back? Like you can try and force, and as a few companies have tried and force people back, but that eventually won't work because that was obviously associated with the great resignation of the last couple of years. So you want people to go back to your office, so you have to start treating your staff as your customers in a way, which is, I think it's somewhat new in terms of like the hierarchy has changed a little bit, and you have to think, okay, how can I make a space interesting for people to come? Because first of all, there's competition, so they might go somewhere else, but also if they're going to open a laptop and send emails, well, they can do that from home, and actually that might save me some money on rent. But you really want that thing. So I think companies started thinking more about purpose, about what they want of the spaces and what they want of their teams, and it's been a bit more introspective, I think.
Okay, so do you think that COVID actually was a benefit? It had it. Do you think good about COVID?
Well, yeah, of course, it was definitely a horrible thing to happen, needless to say. But if there was a silver lining, that was it. Like there was talks, and obviously in the design world, in the workplace interior design, there was already a lot of experimentation with hybrid models of working, with collaboration areas, with breakout spaces. There was a lot of that already. But I feel that prior to 2020, we were just dipping our toes in the water on that. Like we're trying that, but it's like, I had the feeling that it was just for the photo. You know what I mean? Like you see that, and that looks cool, like soft seating and stuff. But you go to an office and people are not really using it all the time. And so COVID was, I think, a catalyst for that.
Sped it up.
Yeah, because you had no choice. So suddenly people are working from home. And so then when you're going to come back, you have a lot of people, especially, parents with, childcare arrangements and things like that, that will tell their employees, well, I understand I have to go back to the office, but I don't want to go back 5 days a week. And, do I need to go back 5 days a week? So then you start getting into the hybrid model, and then you have like different ways of working, and how do you cater for all of that? So you look at the workplace as with a completely fresh set of eyes, which I think is great. So that invigorated the thinking in design.
Yeah. So why do people go back?
Well, there's, as I said earlier, we are social animals, so there's an interaction that is needed. That's for sure. Then there is also one thing that a lot of people I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, some people, some politicians, and we won't get into politics, but I remember some politicians were saying, well, this is a great leveler, we're all in the same boat and all of that, and people were very quick to say, like, no, it's not the same if you live in a flat sharing with 4 people that you live in a mansion when you have to work from home during lockdown. So there is a bit of that. So obviously you will still need your spaces to do things, but also if, let's say, for younger people who are starting in the workplace, whether they vocalize it or not. I remember when I started working, there's a lot that you learn by observing people. Like you might be shy and you might be a bit scared of asking people, how do you work the photocopier or things like that. But you're always observing people. You lose that completely if you're forced to work from home. And so the way you acquire experience in any profession will be handicapped if you're on your own. Like you really learn from interaction. It's like an osmosis process that you can't really point your finger on, but there's a lot of that. And then there's, of course, the water cooler moments, as people describe them, and just standing next to the photocopier and the interaction. Everyone has talked a lot about those, but it's true. You don't get the same when you're having a Zoom meeting or a FaceTime meeting. You don't have the same level of rapport. Mm-hmm. Like when you have physically, like now, look, I'm talking to you, and we notice that we end up looking at the same corner, or we pick the glass of water at the same time, and that actually creates a comfort that you won't have when you're looking at a screen that you don't know what that person is looking at because the camera is in a different place. So there was definitely a lot of reasons, and this is just off the top of my head, but there's a lot of reasons why we really need that interaction. We're human beings after all. But the good thing is that we can look at it from a fresh and a different way.
Yeah, because we've almost had the time out that we can then reflect and
Correct,
yeah.
correct. One of the things that I remember discussing, we had a lot of panels and articles and roundtables during COVID, because that's what people would do. You know, that we would get on Zoom calls and discuss about how it's going to change this. And I remember one, you know, it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it was a good way to summarize in one sentence. Like, we have with COVID, we had to learn the opportunity to, instead of redesign the workplace, we had the opportunity to redefine the workplace. So you could start from scratch. Like, you don't think, when you think in terms of design, it's like adding things to an existing thing, or you know, dressing up a thing, if you will. But if you redefine it, it's like, okay, you go back to basics. First, you think first principles. Why do I need to commute for, in my case, you know, 90 minutes just to get to a place? And I'm not going to do that to open my laptop and send emails. So, okay, if I'm going to do something else, what is it that I'm going to do, and what is the perfect space to do that? How a space can enhance that?
Which really comes back to the whole purpose, doesn't it? And people actually having a reason, having a why for the office, and then that filters down to the people, and they have the reason why to go in the first place, which is great. If a workplace manager was listening now, and they and they were looking at embarking on a new journey, what would the message be to them in terms of what's the first principles to start getting straight in terms of a leadership team or a scope or a brief? What would you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So how do you create a perfect brief for a designer? And in my opinion, I'm usually surprised in my interactions with clients. Like, they always come from the best of intentions, but they come with completely different angles. So some clients will be like, you know, they will tell you the numbers. So, you know, it depends on how they use their brain. So they will give you a spreadsheet. These are my numbers, and I want these meeting rooms, and I want this amount of this and this and this. Some of them were a bit more abstract, and then they will tell you about the why, and they will tell you about the culture of that company. And I would argue that the answer lies somewhere in between. In my particular case, if I was to advise something, I would say, do not, please, in the nicest possible way, do not try to define the space for me. That's my job. And you're hiring me, and I'm good at it. If you don't like it, you will end up doing something else. You don't have to. But a lot of customers, like, it's a good way to start to think about a bad example of a brief. It would be someone who say, "Oh, I had an idea and I sketched it for you," and again, they're coming from a really good place. They're really trying to help you. But I would say, well, what I do, I work with spaces. I can help you with the space side of things. What I don't know about you is what you do. Like, how do you do the things you do? Like, what are your values in your culture? So if I want someone to give me a brief, a perfect brief would be someone telling me what they do, what the people in that workplace are going to do, which, again, if you think about someone opening a laptop and firing emails, that person can be a number of things. They can be a lawyer, they can be an accountant. But so what does your company do? That makes you your company. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you do? Like, do you have, I don't know, brainstorming sessions where you write things and you pace around the room? Are you very social? Like, do you like to take big breaks where you're just getting to know each other, and that, enhances your culture as a business? So the more you learn about that in a semi-abstract way, that will really help me a lot. Mm-hmm. And then you do need, obviously, a few numbers, like how many people, how many square meters are we working with. And then you start putting things together. And then it's when you go to your tools that the customers won't necessarily have, which is, you know about proportion spaces and materials and things. And then you can use those tools to enable those things to happen. So you need to understand what you're trying to enable. Mm-hmm. It's like if a good example of this would be like if I just say I'm going to do an office for an IT company.
Yeah.
So three different people will have three different ideas of what's going to happen. So you might think about the sitcom, the IT crowd. You might think about, the guys who pick up the phone where you have a problem with your laptop and they might be just sitting at a laptop. Or you might think, one of these Silicon Valley companies that have big slides and a running track. And they are completely different workspaces. So just telling you like a very, very vague description of the company won't help you. You really need to understand what their values are, what the culture is, what they really do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Understanding the people and the needs of the people and what the culture is, because essentially the workspace is a brand experience for the people, and you need to kind of exude that brand and your values and that, and you can do that once you know what you're doing, once you know what you've got to play with.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people are, and some companies, maybe some companies, they have to do a bit of soul searching to understand what their values are and what their brand is. Because I would argue that that the word brand can intimidate some people. What's your brand? What do you do as a company? But it's nothing more than what's your approach to doing the things you do and what is motivating you. How would you try to convince someone to work for you? If they're good at their job, you want to attract talent. So that eventually will be your brand. And how do you express that? Through graphic design, through spatial design, through communication. That is what will make the whole image of the brand and the whole space of the brand.
Yeah, and then a brand is it's a feeling as well. Sometimes people think it's a logo,
Yeah.
but it can actually be so much deeper and wider than that. Really, when people you mentioned people soul searching and finding I like that. Is that something you would support people with, or how would you point people?
Yes. So going back to how do you get the perfect brief? In my experience, when you work with a client, the earlier you get engaged, the better as a designer. Because again, you can eliminate all this unconscious bias that they will do it to try and help you. But if a client comes with a sketch already telling you where the meeting rooms are going to be, it's like, well, you're the client, so I don't want to be rude to you, but it's like I have to undo a lot of these things, so I wouldn't be doing my job. So the earlier you get involved, the more you will avoid all of that. And it's like, well, you have to go to the source. And you can help with that because designers are communicators. Design is just a tool of communication.
Yes.
So yes, definitely the earlier we can get involved, the better.
Interesting. And from an architectural aspect, which I find interesting, does the building and contextual design, everything leading up to that, not everything except the interior, the whole surroundings, is that something that influences how someone arrives at a space?
For me, absolutely, 100%. For me, context is an essential part of the design process. And I could even go a step back. So as an architect, if you're going to design a building, the surroundings of that building are crucial. And in my opinion, I wouldn't be happy if I design a building that is made for, say, I don't know, East London, and I can put that building in, I don't know, northern Oslo, and it's going to look the same. For me, there's something wrong because you're not responding to the context. Everything is connected. Everything is interconnected. So if you take that a step inward, and we're talking about the interior design, choosing that empty space, whether it's a Cat A space or a completely empty shell and core, or a new build that you're planning to do an interior design later on, that is part of the designing process. That absolutely yes. So because then you will have your basic parameters, your basic architectural parameters, which will be how is the light getting there? What's the ceiling height? What are the proportion of spaces? Where is the structure? What type of structure it is? There is a lot that you will feel in that empty space that ideally you want the interior design to talk to. So when you're finished, you have a combination of those things, like giving you the best of both worlds.
Yeah, interesting. So when someone's looking for a space, they might know how much square footage they need, and it goes back to the whole numbers thing. But actually, from contextual design, they need to look externally first. What are the key points that they need to look for externally?
Well, that obviously it will depend on their values and their brand. So and the company and what they want to do. So if it's one of the things that would be a bit more universal, if you're creating a workplace in London or in any big city, you probably want amenities next to it. So some people are going to want to cycle there. So what's the cycling situation? Do you have showers in the place? Do you have lockers, and can you park your bike inside the place? So those will be like things that are very in demand now, like that. Those are obvious things. And if not, is it close enough to a gym that maybe you can go and have some sort of deal with the gym? What is the social life around it? You're gonna take customers for meetings and things like that. How is it connected to the stations? All of that would be the beginning of something. And then to a less urban level, you will think in terms of accessibility. Obviously, accessibility is a crucial thing. Is this accessible for everyone? Once you get in the building, what's the natural light situation? Is it just surrounded by buildings and you're never going to get natural light? How, if that's the case, what would be the upside of that? How do you have a lot of natural ventilation that you can get? That would be the things that the space can give you that are a bit more universal. So access, amenities, light, circulation, and the proportion of space. For me, ceiling height is a massive thing. If you can get amazing feeling from spaces that the proportion is giving you a sense of scale, of human scale, making just by the ceiling a bit higher. You will feel different if you can touch the ceiling and you cannot touch the ceiling. It's a completely different experience. But again, that will be more of a depends on what you want to do with the space.
Yeah, when we're talking about sort of sustainability, it's very common to look at recycled materials and mycelium walls and everything, which is great, and it's a really good starting. It's a really good finishing tool, I guess.
Yeah.
But as a starting block, the building and the context of that building, whether it's a smart building, whether it's a well building, like what the natural ventilation is, what the natural light is, all those, is really key and might be overlooked. Someone might be going into a building and then putting in recycled materials, but actually to step back and look earlier on this means that more people can cycle to work because we've got showers and bike racks and safe storage.
100%.
That's actually going to make more of a sustainable impact than having your carpet made out of old fishing nets.
Well, exactly, and that's why design starts at the earliest point where you can have the conversation. The moment you start thinking, looking for empty spaces where you do your design, that is already a decision that will affect. You're absolutely right. Things like sustainability, even we were talking about this the other day, circularity, which is not necessarily the same as sustainability. So a lot of office interior design happens either through a refurbishment or on a Cat A building where you will have some of the finish. You will have a ceiling finish. You will have and a number of times, to be honest, I don't know the percent, but a number of times people will come and just get rid of everything, skip everything, and then do their thing. So that's a good question. Even if the new thing you do is made of recycled fish nets and it's sourced locally and all of that, you just skipped a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? So how about you start thinking about this light part of the Cat A. They have the right lux levels, their LEDs. I can use this, even if maybe not in this configuration, but maybe I rewire the whole thing and I can start reusing this thing. That is already like a conscious choice of keeping things and having a circular mind and approach to design. And also it becomes a nice story to tell.
Yeah, is circular and sustainable the same thing?
No, it's not. No. They're different things, and you will think, you will be thinking differently when you're thinking about sustainability. You could argue that sustainability, you're talking a bit wider when you're talking about sustainability. You're talking about the energy, and you're talking about the community, a number of things. Whereas circularity is about closing the loop and about whatever you choose, whatever products, materials, whatever things that you're doing, it can have the longest possible life, so you can keep reusing it, rechanging it, but without fundamentally changing the nature of it. So they are obviously related concepts, but they're not the same.
Okay. I probably do actually, but do we use the word sustainability incorrectly then?
Oh, it's a very vague word, especially nowadays, because it's very fashionable. It has been fashionable probably for the last 15 years. So in a way, that's a good thing because it creates an awareness. So it's good that we talk about sustainability. The problem is that, it means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And the more you get to learn about real sustainability impact, a lot of people would say sustainability, the first thing they think about is plants. Yeah, plants. You can argue that a natural thing is related to sustainability, but how about helping communities? When you are doing a construction project, something like why don't you get a local school and get them to visit site and maybe get them interested in a career in construction, or or employing a local artist to do a mural instead of buying a piece of art from somewhere else. Those things are sustainability as well, and like this, obviously there's a myriad things.
It's so interesting whether sustainability and circularity are the same thing or different, and why. And I think it's just.
Well, I'll tell you. We just posted it on LinkedIn. So if you look on LinkedIn now, you will see the round table that we did for the magazine for Mixed Interiors. We're talking about circularity, so you can see or take on that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'd love to define sustainability, because everyone says it's sustainable. Well, why do you say that? How are you allowed to say that?
It's very hard to define, isn't it?
It is, isn't
I think it's very hard to define because it's a very big concept, and again, that to me it brings me to the beginning of our conversation. With anything, absolutely anything, but when you use big words like sustainability or even design trends or whatever it is, for me, I always try to stay as humble as possible. Like admit that there is a lot that you will not know, and there's a lot to learn about sustainability. So you can do reading, you can attend courses, talk to experts, listen to podcasts, whatever it is. But for a big topic like that affects all of us and affects the planet, the best thing we can do is to be humble and to try and learn from each other, like not taking things for granted. So yeah, for that's what I think it's a good thing that in terms of sustainability, we're talking about this.
Yeah.
So if someone is like very boldly assessing you're wrong about this in sustainability, I will be suspicious. But if they're like, I think that can add to the conversation, but have you thought about this? I think that's a more constructive way of looking at it.
Yeah. I think there is a lot to learn. I think we're all on a journey, and the only thing that we need from everybody, humility, I love that. But I also think people just need to be transparent, like super transparent.
Yeah.
And I think then that would speed up the process, because nowadays, like everything you touch is sustainable.
Yes,
But
this is true.
But why is it sustainable? Like what tests has it passed, or how are you allowed to call it sustainable? I mean, do you know what I mean?
It has become a tick in the box for a number of companies and for a number of clients, because Yeah, that's probably the downside of it being so ubiquitous, because everyone's talking about it, and then you need your green credentials or whatever, or is this building BREEAM or SCA or so, and there's these ways of just ticking the box, and
Yeah.
that can be misleading. And you go now, you go to a design conference, or you go, or you get a new product and you start asking for the credential, and they'll just show you the credential, and everyone has a story. So it would be great if they're all true, but you have to become a bit, I wouldn't say suspicious, but you do have to do your due diligence for that, for sure.
Yes.
So for instance, when we are talking about recycled plastics and recycled materials, things, okay, so the thing you have to go a bit deeper and think about, okay, so it's made of recycled things. Okay, what's the binder? Because if the binder is not a sustainable material, then you know that it's recycled, but it won't be recyclable. And it probably has taken this amount of energy. So there is a lot of like layers of information about products and about systems, that things might look sustainable at the surface, but then you dig deeper and it's like, oh, well, there's a bit more to the story. It doesn't mean that they are horrible for the planet, but it's not the same thing. So I do think we have a responsibility as designers and as consumers to try and learn more.
Yeah, because in a lot of industries, I mean, well, even in construction, you have well certified buildings, then in food, you have vegan approved food, and you have like most things have a certification saying that, okay, you can say that this is well, you can say that this is vegan, but there's nothing to actually stipulate, no regulation that this is sustainable. But I can say this fabric's either fire retardant or it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no grey area, whereas sustainability feels very grey at the moment, which I know it's part of conversation. It's an evolving journey, which I think is great. But we have got to be super transparent, because there's this kind of murkiness.
I agree. And you're right. The only thing we can do is to keep talking about it and be open and honest about this, and be ready to admit our mistakes as well. You know, like sometimes we might have done, especially as designers, we might have made decisions. I would have made probably decisions 10, 12 years ago that I thought that they were at the front. I remember, I can give you an example. I won't tell you the client, but I remember for a particular client, I was looking for hard flooring solutions, and I wanted, they were quite environmentally conscious, and we started toying with the idea of doing bamboo flooring. And at that time, it looked like a great solution. And I wouldn't say that it's not, but at that time, I didn't think about, okay, where is that bamboo coming from? Because that changes the whole, like bamboo is a sustainable material, of course, but what if it's coming from Taiwan? Then you have embodied carbon. And so it was just conceptual. We never built that. I'm just saying that I didn't know at the time, and I thought I was like making a very environmentally conscious decision back then. So it's good to remember your mistakes with a bit of humility and things like, we still can learn about these things.
Yeah, I think that's just part of the journey, isn't it? Because I can remember back in the day, paper bags were ditched. They were don't save the trees, don't use a paper bag, and everyone started using plastic bags because it was, I don't know, saving the trees. And then now we're back to paper bags again. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's using craft paper and craft Christmas wrapping.
Absolutely.
And all of like the unboxing experience for all your sort of iPhone and all your tech and your clothing and everything. It's all sort of now.
It's an ever-evolving thing, and that's it. It's important. Just we'll make mistakes along the way. We just have to keep trying and keep learning from each other. That's the only way.
No, that's excellent. So it's quite to say the least, like the thing I'm picking up from you here is that it's quite it's a journey. It's quite murky waters isn't a very nice word, but it's a lot of like unknowns. Let's put it that way. So how would you advise a client if they're taking a space and they want it to be sustainable? what advice would you give somebody?
What I would try to do is it really depends on the time you have with that client, because obviously time is really, really precious when you're trying to get information about that client. So you want to get to know a proper brief, what they do and what their values are. But the key thing would be to try and understand what their understanding of sustainability is. Like, okay, so when you're talking about sustainability, do you want to get a BREEAM excellent or a BREEAM outstanding or something like that? Or are you really thinking about, no, I really care. Like, how can I make this, we can worry about the certifications, but I really want to make an impact. Like, I have a lot of money and, I'm worrying about doing the right thing. So then the conversation gets richer. So you really need to understand where they come from. And let's say the worst case scenario, they don't know anything. They just know to tick a box, because otherwise, they won't let me spend this money. So then you have the responsibility and try to educate them a little bit. It's like, okay, do you know why you have to do these things? And can you see the impact that you can you can have if you do these things? Like, this is the impact you're going to have on the community, on your staff, on the building, the durability of the building. You can even talk about the economic impact of that. So,
Yeah.
like, okay, short term you're going to spend this money, but the life cycle of the building, then you're actually going to create a building that is easier to maintain and cheaper to maintain. And there's lots of ways, or the amount of waste that you're going to generate with this particular system or with this particular material. So that's the only thing I can think of, like trying to have an honest conversation where you educate them. You can't force them; they're a client.
Yeah.
But at least say, well, are you like make them aware of the impact of their decisions. I think that is definitely one of the responsibilities of designer.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's also something that the people are going to be demanding, wanting to see going forwards anyway, isn't it? We're going to, I mean, I think everybody's getting on board slowly, but even if someone is resistant
Yeah,
for themselves, the people that are going to be using the space.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Like, people are more and more aware of that. If you think about, it's easy to be a bit cynical and to think, yeah, some people just want ticks and boxes and this and the other, but in reality, but if you think about where we were, let's say 20 years ago when I started, and where we are now in terms of knowledge and awareness of myriad things, but particularly for sustainability, I think we've come a long way, and I think that's a very, very good thing. But then you have to think generationally. Like, the new generations are much more aware about these things, and they really, you can tell when you have slightly younger clients that the way they see things and the way they talk about these things is different. Like, they they really care a lot about this concept. They didn't learn them in a workshop that HR put them through. You know what I mean? It's a real thing, and generationally, I think things are improving in terms of awareness of a number of things, but particularly sustainability.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. How should people feel and engage in a space?
That's a very very big question. How do people feel and engage in space? Well, ideally, and again, if I can go back to my humility thing. Like, the only thing a designer can do, and the only thing a good, in my opinion, a good design can do, is to facilitate and enhance whatever people were going to do there in the first place. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, if a good design in a lot of ways should be invisible. It's more about creating an environment that whatever you're going to do with that space, you can do it like in the best way for you, that you can feel like completely satisfied, empowered, energized, comfortable. I am aware that this sounds very, very abstract, but there's a number of things that we do as designers that are relatively invisible, like, controlling the natural light and controlling the quality of the air you breathe. That will already have an impact on how you feel and on your motivation and how you're doing the things you do. And then with other things like, tactile things and the finishes, that has a lot of psychological impact on the things you do. So with that, we use, as designers, we use them as tools to enhance what people are doing. So we're going back to what we were saying about the concept of the office as people are coming back to collaborate and to do social interactions. So, okay, what type of space will make the most out of that? Will be a space where people feel comfortable, like this is very, very comfortable, and I can sit here and look at you diagonally, but we could rearrange it so we could be looking at each other, or we can both look at a whiteboard, and then you have that feeling of collaboration. We're both looking at our goal, you know what I mean, like when we're walking together. So all of those things you can achieve with a space. So it really depends on what that space is going to be used for. And our task as designers will be to enhance and to get the most out of it for people.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's broad, like in the terms of it depends on your vision and your purpose, your why, if you like, and what people are doing. If you want people to be more creative, or if you want people to collaborate, and whatever it is that they're doing, that we can enhance that and improve their experience in that sense. So we're really providing this kind of enriching experience for people so they can enable them to be the best version of themselves. Can we use, typically we think of the visual sense, but can we use all our 5 senses in a workspace design?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because as you say, in terms of any design, we tend to communicate first with the visual, through magazines and images and that. Even when we're doing a presentation, we will always start with visuals and with drawings. But hopefully, as you are getting deeper into the design, you start introducing more things. Definitely, you start introducing the tactile with when you bring a mood board and you encourage your customer to actually touch the materials. And then, especially with nowadays with so much open and different flexible open spaces, you can work on the acoustics and the hearing. Now, in terms of smell and taste, for me, it would be a difficult one to use in a design. But definitely, I'm sure it can be used in other types of design. And I know that there's a relationship between smell and taste, and some designers have explored this. I haven't really done a lot with it. But what I can tell you is that other than the traditional, commonly considered 5 senses, there's you can find a lot of information about. We actually have 7 senses. Like if actually there's University of London has a department that studies the senses, and they can argue that there's 20 something, but it's widely accessible, the information about the 7 senses. So you talk about the 5 external senses, how our body communicates, through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin.
So I have 7 senses.
You do. Yeah, you do. Everyone does. Like it's not like magic or anything like that. But there's 2 other senses that are you feel them internally, but they are senses nonetheless. And so one of the senses is called vestibular, and it's related to your balance, the sense of balance. So, for instance, when you go on a lift, you know that the lift is going up or down, but your 5 external senses are not giving you any information whatsoever about that. So that is your vestibular sense. And there's another sense called the proprioception, which is your sense of space and direction. So where you are in a room. So, like for instance, in the same example, in a lift, a claustrophobic person can start feeling very, very anxious, and there's nothing that they're sensing, but they have something inside. Or you have this sense of you you have the sense of feeling something great when you go into a space with a really high ceiling, or you go into this big spaces. I'm thinking, like a big cathedral, like you go
Yeah.
on the tallest part under a dome of a cathedral in St. Paul's, or in Florence, something like that. You have a sense of that space that you wouldn't have if you have a ceiling there, and that is something that you can actually feel. It's not your imagination, and you're definitely not touching or anything like that. So that is your sense of direction, or the same way as when you close your eyes, where your hands are, so that you have that sense. So the reason why I mentioned those two extra senses is that those are very important for designers, for space designers, because with our external five senses, we've discussed them, and they, a lot of people think of those. But I, probably because of my architectural background, I think a lot about your sense of spatial awareness, and when you are in a room, and how different you feel, where you're in the corner of the room or in the center of the room, or whether the ceiling is higher or lower, or if you are going into one direction, you're in a corridor, or you suddenly walk into a big space. And all of those things will have an impact in how you perceive the space and how you use the space. So those senses, for me, really complement the other five. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Apart from a lift, how do we use a sense of balance?
Well, it's that type of things is the same. How you feel dizzy sometimes after you have been, when the kids are spinning and you feel dizzy after that.
Yeah.
The same thing. That's your sense. Like it's actually in your ears, but it's a sense of, when something is right and balanced, and how you're responding to the forces of gravity, I guess.
Yeah. But I can see how like perspective and size kind
Exactly.
of plays with that whole.
Well,
Well, what did you call that sense?
the vestibular sense. Oh, the vestibular sense is about the balance, and the
Balance.
other one is the proprioception.
Perception. Okay,
Yeah,
and that is how you perceive.
the
Yeah,
space. Yeah,
the
where
size.
you are in the space, in a given space, or the sense of direction. Yeah.
Interesting. That's great. I didn't know about those other two, so I'm learning fast.
Yeah, and again, it's not like a secret thing. It's because when we talk about the senses, it's not like it's more about we are using or the cultural way of like what we learn as kids or how we communicate is, if you think about it, it's actually a philosophical concept. So that the five senses were, if I'm not mistaken, first described by Aristotle. So it's a philosophical thing because it's how a person communicates with the world. So Aristotle defined them as five because it was like your interaction with the world. But then when there's been more studies about this and how you perceive the world and spaces and stuff. As I said, your University of London has a branch studying the senses. So it's a fascinating field.
Interesting. Do you use sound much?
Um, Not sound itself, but more the control of the sound, like the
Yeah.
control of reverberation, control of echo, directional sound, like the geometry of a space obviously can affect reverberation and echo. And sometimes we have used masking sounds to you know to when there is a certain level of sound that is unavoidable in a space, you can mask it, and psychologically people will get used to it. So yeah.
Yeah. And then you play it at a certain, like white noise, you play it at a certain pitch, at a certain volume, and then after a while you cut that out psychologically, and that also then cuts out other human voices or
Correct. You
other
have to start
sounds.
introducing it.
Yeah.
Like you can't just go at the beginning. People will notice the difference, but
Yeah.
after a few days, it's completely embedded.
And that just helps people manage distractions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's an interesting concept because we obviously work with acoustics and it's about reducing reverberation. But sometimes people might come to us, and I'm not an acoustic consultant myself, but people might come to us and have an issue with the sound, I suppose, the acoustics in a space, and it can actually be because it's too dead. There's not enough.
Yeah.
There's not enough
That's a good
reverberation,
point. Yeah.
and then you can hear every single thing that's being said absolutely perfectly, and not to unsell, but you have to, like
No,
you say, like
absolutely.
you don't need any more acoustics. You actually need less or sound masking,
Yeah.
and that can actually be an answer. So
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. There's I can't remember where I saw this, but I think it was an art exhibition. There was just to prove that taking it to extreme, there was a room that a local artist they put like a lot of absorbent surfaces to the point that you got into the room and the sound was so dead that it was scary. Like you got into like you felt weird in the room. So yeah, it's like with everything you need a sense of proportion and balance. Yeah.
yeah, but that does really, I mean, one of the top complaints, isn't it, about distractions and about noise in the office, and people like to work from home because they can kind of, I mean, my house isn't that quiet, but some people's is.
But
And
you are absolutely right, and it's especially now coming going back to the workplace and the idea of this collaboration. And what we don't want to do is to start to create enclosed rooms where that the whole idea of collaboration is that you can be in an area that is open, and if someone is passing by and you're working on this particular project, they can go and join you, but at the same time, if they sit opposite, they can still be working. It's a balance, obviously, and as designers, we're becoming much more aware of the acoustics, and we in my company we work with acousticians for all of our projects, because just to say I put an acoustic panel here doesn't really mean anything unless you have done your calculations and you work with an acoustician. And also even the angle of that wall will have an influence of what's happening acoustically with the room. So I find it fascinating. I think it's a great tool, especially nowadays with the way workplace designs are evolving, and not only workplace designs, everywhere. Like you go to a restaurant, where the food is amazing, but you can't have a conversation with the person opposite you, you're less likely to come, even if though the food is amazing. So it's that type of thing. So
it's about designing in dwell time that people stay, or designing in movement that people move on to the next phase.
exactly, I've heard the story, and I don't know if this is true or not. So there's a particular retail brand, garments retail brand that plays when they control the music depending on how many people are in the store. So basically, if they have too many people, so the staff are overwhelmed, then they will change the music to like a high tempo, some sort of like a disco techno thing, and then they will pump up the volume so people feel a bit uncomfortable, not in the mood for shopping, and then they will leave the shop, and then they will go back to a chilled music. So I've heard these stories. I can't really, but it would make sense.
Yeah, no, I've looked at retail actually, and the light, temperature, and brightness, and I don't know the exact right words for it, and the music, at rush hour, they make it brighter and a faster tempo because their whole point is about a transaction and getting people into the store and back out again as fast as possible because it's rush hour. Like 8 o'clock in the morning, and then come 10 o'clock in the morning, when it's maybe like elderly people coming for a catch up with like their other sort of fellow friends, they warm it up and they slow it down, and
Makes perfect
and it's
sense.
about getting them to stay and increasing dwell time, because that's how they will sell more. So it's amazing, like the impact that we can have through our senses and our behaviors, and how we think and act just purely by playing with our emotions, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also think how these things are related. So when you were describing this, I was thinking about the circadian technology for lighting, which is now used more and more. And it's, they described it a lot in the well standard, but we're using it more and more. And we did actually, in one of the designs that we did, one of the floors, we were just refurbishing one floor in a particular office building, and we installed circadian lighting, and compared to the other floors, the most interesting outcome after visiting and doing a few surveys, and we put some monitors for testing and things like that, it was one of the, for me, unexpected outcomes. It was that the noise levels went down as well, because with circadian rhythms, people were working a bit more comfortably, they were a bit more calm, and therefore they were less loud. How cool is that?
Wow, I never put light.
Might be anecdotal, but definitely in that
Yeah.
case it was. Yeah.
Oh, but it's amazing that you've done that test
yeah,
against
it-
different floors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never would have put
Yeah.
those two.
Yeah, and it makes
But
sense.
everything is linked, isn't it?
But, well, that's the thing, and we talk about the 5 or 7 senses, but they're all connected because you experience all of them at the same time.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And that truly does change how people think, feel, and behave. You know, obviously, if you're attracting people into the office, or if you're trying to increase productivity,
Exactly.
or whatever you're trying to do, you can, for good and bad, you can impact people's mental and physical health in a
Absolutely.
tremendously, right?
Yeah, and that's, we haven't talked much about this, but one of the things that, especially the last few years and during COVID, for obvious reasons, but we start to understand the responsibility we have as designers and for spaces, is the mental health aspect and mental health awareness. There's much more awareness now about mental health than it was, say, 10 years ago, but also there's much more understanding of how spaces can help with that, you know, in terms of mindfulness, the light, the noise, the textures that you have will have a massive impact on your mindfulness and your mental health. Designing for neurodiversity, now we're starting to learn more about it, and it's really fascinating. So that's, you know, that goes back to what I'm saying about keep being humble and realizing that there's so many cool things that we can still learn and influence, and it's a very rewarding field to work on. I mean,
Have you done much with neurodiversity?
I'm just starting to learn actually, but we started in my company. We started bringing groups of neurodiverse people to see how they interacted with our space, because space we redesigned our office 2 years ago, and we started to learn more about what things have more impact or not. There's especially things like lights and plants. You can tell that those are tools that you can use for neurodiversity. So really interesting.
How does it impact them?
I think I can't tell you at a deeper level, because I don't know. I'm just learning myself. But definitely in terms of bringing a sense of more calmness, less distraction, like more in touch with nature, like people that in other environments, or we're moving them around the office, will be like clearly uncomfortable because they are, you know, neurodiverse, and they had. When we would put them in an area surrounded by plants and with controlled circadian lights and a lot of acoustic protection, so that they could stay there a lot longer, and we can have actually deeper conversations there. So that just shows you how you can use those tools and creating a much more inclusive environment.
Yeah, it's amazing that actually just visibly their level of comfort, which is the most important thing, right? That everybody's happy and comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's going to bring out the best in them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And all of us. That you've actually, I've been an eyewitness to that. I think that's quite inspiring for anyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through the lighting and the plant, which I've seen the planting in your office, and it is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, big shout out to planting, really, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but for me, the key takeaway of that, because that, I think, at least for me, we just started to learn about these things. It's like, well, how exciting that we can actually go a bit deeper into making our spaces more, to cater for more people and to make them more accessible. That is going to have an impact on well-being, of course.
Because it's very easy to think about disability, and rightly so, as like a mobility,
Yeah.
and rightly so, making it accessible for wheelchair users. But there's also like obviously the visually impaired and the neurodivergent and mute, and there's a lot of
You
them.
are
It's in there.
absolutely
It's
right.
very, very wide.
And we go back to what we're talking about, sustainability. Accessibility sometimes is a tick in the box, and not with any bad intentions, but you will like when you're finishing a design, or you're like midpoint through a design, some people will ask you about building regs and part-time, and is this accessible or not? Is your the switch for the room, is it at the right height and stuff? Those things are really essential, but what people forget is that, you know, those things are the minimum requirements. Like, you know, this is to make sure that you're not discriminating, but actually if you try to include that from the very beginning, you're absolutely right. You think about people in wheelchairs, because that is their world is much more difficult than our world, but there's a lot more disabilities that you will have an impact as a designer, like visually impaired, the way you play with colors and contrast, and with acoustic for people with auditory problems, and then you go into neurodiversity and things like that. So there is a lot that I feel as a responsibility, but also something that it's good to learn, because then you know that you will be catering for a wider audience, and you will effectively be fulfilling your mission, which is, you know, creating spaces that get the most out of people and everyone can enjoy and use.
Yeah, no, that's really valuable, and I think that's coming to the forefront more. We're seeing that more, people being more inclusive and diverse in their designs, and everyone benefits anyway.
Absolutely.
It's not just those with the disability. We all actually benefit, like the planting.
But that's the thing. It's not a zero-sum game.
No.
That's the thing. You just start like by doing those things. Actually, you have a wider palette, and then you can create more diverse environments, and so you're actually catering for more people, but also everyone will benefit from that.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Is there anything else you want to touch on, or I've forgotten?
No, I mean, I just want to say thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This is I really like your space here.
I'm just going to see if there's anything that I should bring up, Natalia. Is there anything you want me to?
I was holding out for a very long time.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Anything that we've?
I think we've covered everything.
I think we have. But yeah, excellent. Okay,
Amazing.
I'll do a wrap up to the camera.
Yeah, sure.
Which we got one more time.
Of course, yeah. You shouldn't have hold it. Like any time. It makes it a bit more natural.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Enrique.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, especially now knowing that people are quoting you. I got in early, so that's really, really cool.
No, it's amazing to have you share those insights about sustainability versus circularity and people, and then definitely from your architecture background and the whole like contextual design. I find that really interesting, and how that impacts and changes people's mindset, and essentially makes healthier, happy people in the workplace. And
that's it, yeah.
In a really positive way that goes out and ripples and changes their personal lives and their relationships outside of work as well, because we all know if you have a great day at work, you have a better evening and night. And
but that's exactly it. I think it's a responsibility, but it's a very exciting responsibility. I think what we do as designers, and as you know, as providers of products, we are enhancing the human experience. Sounds very grandiose, but it's true.
Yeah, 100% it's true.
So we have the chance to make people's days a little bit better.
Yeah.
You know, their daily life.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and that wraps up this episode.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.